All right, welcome back to the Your Next Gen Friend podcast. Today I'm here with Suzy and super excited to have just a conversation talking about life growing up, family dynamics, raising the next generation of our own, just kind of feelings, thoughts, everything that kind of goes with it. We're just going to have a candid conversation and I'm excited to see where this goes. And at the end, she's going to share about a new project and tool that I'm super excited to use with my daughter. And so stick around to hear about that. So Suzy, welcome.
Thanks, Andrea. I'm really looking forward to the conversation.
Cool. Well, maybe we can just start a little bit of background about you, your family, just anything you kind of want to bring in and share for our audience of next gens.
Yeah. So I would be third generation in a family system. I was 28 when I inherited an income producing property from my dad, who was still alive at the time. And it was then that I really started having to navigate the process of who am I within the context of family wealth that I didn't earn, and yet I have the benefit of receiving income from it. And at that time in my life, all through my 20s, I lived in Hawaii for a significant portion of it, and I was a CrossFit coach and personal trainer and worked some other odd jobs. So I didn't make a lot of money. I hadn't found a professional footing. So I was really still trying to find my place. And then, like similar to how sometimes a windfall of money comes from a business sale, I inherited this property. And to me, I just thought, well, I didn't earn this. I didn't do anything. I don't think it's actually mine. Maybe it's in my name now. I signed papers, but I just pretended it didn't exist for a few years and didn't touch any of the income from it. Really, it was managed by a third party, so I didn't have much to do with it. And it wasn't until I was going to get married a couple of years later that I realized money from that could be helpful in purchasing a house. So rather than purchase a house for my husband and I to live in, I ended up getting an income producing property myself up in my town. So that sent me on this journey of real estate investing. And I decided this is how it sat well enough with me, which was all of the income that I got from the initial property, I put toward investing in my own real estate. And then somehow it felt like I'd earned it enough to use the income from that. So I never dipped into the capital, the first set of income. I reinvested and then utilized the cash flow from those properties to for my life. So that's really what got me started. And through that process, I still didn't really understand a lot about my family's. Um, I didn't understand a lot about wealth or how to handle wealth properly. I really got good at real estate investing, but when it came to the other assets, where the other assets were, I just inherited a team of advisors and let things ride. And soon I started realizing, oh, they are not doing what I need them to be doing. I started coming into my own much more and ended up reading, just educating myself a lot about money, about what kind of investments, how to manage my own investments. And I went through this whole process thinking, gosh, it would have been nice if I had some guidance in it. And so that's got me where I am now, offering guidance to other people who are young, inheriting money, trying to figure out who they are, and fumbling along the way. So I'm hoping that my experience helps people get through theirs a little smoother.
Yeah. No, that's great. Okay, there's a couple things in there I want to kind of plug into. The first is kind of that benefiting, like feeling those feelings around like inheriting something that you didn't earn and kind of
Hmm.
navigating that experience. So maybe let's start there and then we can go back to kind of the education piece because I think that's a big piece of it too. So my story, my parents started putting money in investment accounts for us when we were young. That's when my dad kind of started teaching about like what is compounding? Like what does it mean for money to compound when you have it invest and what are
Yeah.
returns? Like that was before my family even had a big wealth event. We were kind of learning the mechanics of of money. So that is like one experience I had. But even still to this day, I look at the money in that account sometimes and I'm like, yes, that's all in my name, but like, should I really touch that money if I never had to touch, and I say this sometimes, if I never
Mhm.
had to touch my parents' money and I could just pass that right down to my kids and I could build all my own wealth, that would make me feel better and more authentic.
Mhm.
And so I've wrestled with this idea for a long time around like do I really have to be a wealth creator in the sense that like the Gen 1 in my family was a wealth creator of completely starting from scratch? Or like, where is the line or where is that jumping point to kind of take that foundation that someone else has built and really jump from there. And so I had to do a lot
Yeah.
of thinking around like what is that foundation that I'm okay with leveraging? And it changed again when I had kids because I was like, I wouldn't want my kids to start from scratch. Like that's so
Yeah.
silly. Like I would
Yeah.
want them to take everything that I had and kind of jump from there. So what does
Yeah.
that bring up from you in relation to your own journey around kind of navigating that property? I know that you shared kind of to use the initial property as a catalyst for the second, which I think is really great. But was there anything else that you were thinking about when you like first started inheriting that or moving closer to marriage and thinking about kind of growing your own portfolio, and how have your thoughts changed over time?
Yeah, well, I can relate to what you're saying, and it's still in my life so refreshing to hear someone else say something like what you said and realize, oh, wow, I'm really not alone, because those are feelings that I've had for so long and had so much trouble articulating. So thanks, I'm glad that you shared that. But there is a sense of, so my business, I have a business out now called Family Wealth Dynamics, but the original title of my business was Given, Not Earned, because that was the whole focus of why it like what the struggle for me was. I was given something that I didn't earn, and what am I supposed to do with this? And how am I supposed to feel about it? Is it supposed to be a catalyst, like you said, to jump from a higher board and get higher in life, or is it something that I can just live off of? Because I could not work and I could use it and I could live fine. Um, but I didn't understand what the purpose of it was. And I think that's something that families can really work on clarifying with their adult children is with you when you get money, what are the expectations around this? And I do feel like there's estate planners and financial advisors. And so there's trusts and then there's financial documents, but there's not usually somebody that handles the relational aspects of money. And that's where I feel like families oftentimes go wrong is it's humans that are receiving this. So let's teach that specific human exactly who that person is, how they can best use this for their own life. Because how one child uses it to their benefit to become like fully realized into who they're meant to be is going to be different from how another child can. So for me, what's like what I could stomach, what was palatable to me was, all right, I will use it as a jumping off point, like what you were talking about. I have been given all this. I do feel some shame around it. I see other people my age working really hard and hardly making anything. And here I am given all this, and I have the opportunity to make it so much more. So I decided, well, I guess I feel that way, but I'm still going to make something of it. So I decided I'll grow what I was given. Um, it's not how, I don't think it's how it has to be done, but it's what I could sit with.
So yeah, the like step, like deciding what feels comfortable to you. Do you remember any type of like reflection or like what were you thinking about when you were kind of navigating that, like what felt
Mm.
comfortable to you? Was there any like type of question or scenario that you ran or people that you were able to talk to at that point to help you think through those things?
That's a good question. I think at that point, when I was early on in it, I was asking financial advisors about it, and I was getting some help, but not, it just felt a little bit shallow. Like, yeah, I want so much more than what you're giving me. Um, And so at that point, I got really involved in educating myself, and that was exciting. Um, I think as I got into real estate, I allowed that to feel like a profession to me, which is something that I really needed. I needed to feel like I was doing something productive. And the education I put myself through, not financially, just educating myself with real estate, um, allowed me to have this sense that I am creating something more. It's not only what I've been given, but I'm adding to it by educating myself and turning it, uh, like multiplying it. Do you remember any? Did you do anything like that?
Yeah, I should have known you would ask it back. What were things that helped? So, my husband, and maybe we can talk about kind of marrying someone who didn't have wealth, but he
Mhm.
is a great kind of thought partner for me on a lot of things and talking through like what are our value systems or kind of what's important to us as a couple or where do we imagine that we are going like as a team, like what is our kind of goal. I
Mhm.
also am involved in a mastermind called Go Abundance Women.
Oh,
And
neat.
yeah, so while those people are more like first gen, like they're creating their own wealth, a lot of them can relate to some of the things that I was saying, at least in terms of like thinking of building something, um, like where to get capital from. Because when I talk about family money, more in terms of capital that I thought I could invest in myself and potentially pay back
Mm.
someday. Basically, this idea of like you have a starting base, and if I can invest in myself and I have values, and my husband and I were like, these are the causes we care about, or the type of environment we want to help our kids on, or the things that we think that we can do to really help the world be like a better place. Like I have conviction
Mm.
that the work I'm going to be able to do with families is going to help more families, right, move through and stay together, and it's going to help their businesses stay together and continue supporting their clients and their communities. And so that ripple effect of the work that I'm doing, like why wouldn't I take that
Mhm.
and kind of build from there. I also
Yeah.
asked my dad, I said, "What's your impression of this? Like why did you kind of build wealth?" Like he eventually he hit a number and he's like he's in Tiger 21 and he's like I got to the point where like there's guys who have a lot more than me and they're still growing. Like they're in this like but I want more, I want bigger impact.
Mhm.
And my dad was like, "I think I reached my number." Like I feel
Yeah.
really good. Like I'm going to be able to do all the things that I want and provide what I want for my kids. And I was like, "Well, what is that?" And to be able to have that conversation with my dad about why he built wealth, because he grew up in Iowa. They were a pretty poor
Mm.
family.
Wow.
And so for him to be at this point now, when he thinks about his life and what he was trying to do, and he said to me, it was basically like, well, I created all this wealth so that I could pass that to future generations and help them not have to struggle as much as I had to struggle. And when
Mhm.
he said that, when we had that conversation, I was like, oh, that was like a moment of release. I was like,
Yeah.
oh, my dad wants this for me too. Like, also now, if I go out and struggle on purpose, when my dad already told me that he wants me to be able to use this, I'm kind of
Mhm.
going in conflict to why he built that. And that
Mm.
helped me give myself a little bit more permission.
That makes sense. I think that's really speaks to your dad's character to know when enough is enough.
Mhm.
That's hard, especially when somebody has knows how to make money. And the more money you have, the easier it is to make more money. And you just it's like it becomes endless possibilities. But to know when enough is enough, and then switch focus to something else that's meaningful and important to life. I really admire that kind of quality. And I think that my dad um, well, we didn't have a business windfall is different, so it's very different. Kind of if that money all comes like at once versus something that's been built
Mm.
generation by generation.
Yep.
Yeah, but it sounds like to me when I speak with families and what I'm hearing you say also is Parents really want to make sure that their children have purpose in life and that the money that they give them doesn't disable them from finding purpose.
Mm.
And so if they can make it easier to find the purpose, like if this money can be an assist rather than a um, I want to say a defense, something that disables a person.
Yep.
If it can assist a person in growing, that's great. But if this money is going to disable you from growing because you don't have to become anything, that's what I believe their major fear is. And I think it's really a real fear, but it oftentimes I notice it stops them from bringing up the conversation. It's like instead of sharing with their kids the reality of the family money, they just pretend it doesn't exist. And then one day the kid gets it and doesn't have any education on how to be with this money. And especially if the adult child hasn't figured out who they are yet, that can be incredibly disabling.
Yeah.
Um, yeah, I think my parents were very similar in that they wanted to give us all the opportunities that would help us thrive on our own and give us a platform to start from so that we wouldn't have to trudge through the
Mm.
muck to get there ourselves. And yeah, I don't know. There's something to be said for trudging through the muck, but then there's also something to be said for being given a helping hand along the way. And I think for some people need to trudge and work really hard to make it themselves, and some people can take what they've been given and then make it so much more and learn from some other people's mistakes without having to make the mistakes themselves.
Hmm. Yeah.
Yeah.
Do you feel like you fell in one of those camps? Like you obviously
Yeah.
trudged for a little bit, it sounds like in your story, but then you were able to kind of really build off of the asset that you were given.
Mm. Yeah. I think that I was vulnerable to falling into the disabling, the this money disabled me kind of camp. And I think it was not until my husband came into the picture and realized that my parents were still paying for my car insurance and my phone bill and all these things hadn't crossed my mind that I needed to start doing as an adult. And I was 28, 29 at this point. And my husband, my, I guess he was my fiance at that point, said, "Hey, we need to, this isn't your parents' responsibility. We need to switch all these things over and separate you from your parents a little bit more." And so at that point, he was really the impetus for me to open my eyes and see how little I was doing for myself. So once he helped me see that, that really allowed me to start taking action for myself and get into real estate and making something of what I'd been given instead of just being thankful for it and not doing much with it.
Oh, that's cool.
Mm.
Um, at what point kind of in dating or like moving towards marriage, was it really like once you were engaged and you started like to dig into your own finances that conversation was brought up, or was there kind of an awareness of some of this that your boyfriend or then fiance kind of had of the situation? I'm curious because everyone does that a little bit different too.
Yeah. Our situation I think is a little unique because I love my family. I think there's a whole lot of it's normal to me. Like everyone's family is normal to them. But my dad was much older. I was the youngest from his second marriage, and he got Parkinson's a disease when I was living in Hawaii. So when I was 26, I moved back home. And my parents have this property where there's the main house, and then on the neighboring property is a farmhouse. So at the beginning of our marriage, my husband and I lived in the farmhouse on the property. So he was very much entering my family's life. So I think that he understood like there's got to be some money here, but it wasn't it was not never an opulent lifestyle.
Hmm.
So the conversation, I think we kind of took it step by step and had small conversations that eventually led to us both understanding the implications of what I had versus what he had and what we have together and what we don't have together, what's always only going to be mine and never his, that's a tough thing for a spouse too.
Hmm. Yeah,
Yeah.
sir. Yeah, my experience is not dissimilar. I
Oh.
think when we, or maybe, I mean, it's very unique in its own way, but I met my husband at around that point was when my dad had his wealth event. And so like my parents are in the process of moving to the mountains to like a town
Mm,
where you don't just like but you don't just like buy property if you're like some random person. And so there
right.
is like there are very visible symbols that there is change happening in our lives. And I think that was just something that we had to navigate together because when
Mm.
we decided to get married and oh my dad though he had like these 20 questions that we were supposed to answer to get on like do we have the same philosophy about money. That was stuff that was very important to my dad because in our family we welcome spouses come in and they become a part of the family. They get to learn about all the mechanics of the money and the family limited partnership and all those things. So even though it's kind of under one person's name, like that person gets welcomed in. And so that was very
Mm,
important to my dad at that point that there was some alignment and I could see and I could feel that tension. Obviously at the end of the day it was my decision, right? But there was a leap of like okay, there's some different things here where the mindset is a little bit different around just the way that we could approach things or the way that we think about investments or the way that we think about purchasing a house. Like I
mm,
think for both of us, I was going through that like mental transformation of like what's my relationship really to this money around the same time that my husband came in. And so it
mm.
was cool to kind of get to define that together. I think it's a very mid 20s type of conversation
Yeah.
that many rising gens have around like either the wealth itself or a family business itself and what your relationship is with that if you want to go into it if you want to go out of it and what's important to you and like your life's purpose and all of those things those are like very defining conversations of the 20s.
Yeah. Did your husband feel, I'm curious if he felt any lack of, or like he was afraid that people would think he was marrying into your family for the money?
um that's a good question. I don't know. Like when we got married and we had our wedding at my parents' house, I think there were some people that came that were like, "Oh," like it was that moment where they're like they start to realize, like when you talk about the fancy, like at the beginning when you're like, that person has a nicer car, they have a nicer house. Like, why is someone being your friend? Is it only because of
Yeah,
that symbol? I
right.
think something that I'm grateful for in a way is that coming later in my life, that was never a visible symbol that anyone ever had or
Mm,
associated with me, including my fiance. Like we met in college, so it's very like isolated,
yeah,
and kind of like no one really knows about those things when you're in a
right.
context or like a social setting like that. And that
Mhm.
also helped me feel more like a a normal person,
Yeah,
quote unquote, but still it's that like that comparison in your brain. So I'm going to shift away from my husband and now I'll go to that like moment in college because I feel like we could maybe have a good discussion here. Like I remember my first year in college, like I have money in an account that I can use. Most of it is stuff that I've earned, but I see friends and we go out and it's like, am I supposed to pay for everyone's meal? Because I
mm,
certainly could. I certainly have like more I know and I can look at things. It's the beginning of me like figuring out about wealth. Like certainly I can tell I have more and that like that internal pressure that I felt around like what am I supposed to really use this money for
mm,
when you're then comparing yourself to someone else. So I don't know if
mhm,
that's unique for me because it came like in college. I didn't really grow up with that tension all along, but I'm curious kind of your experience with.
mm. I like hearing your experience, and I do feel like that's something that so many people with money face. Like, I could pay for everybody, should I? And then if you person does step into that, does it lead to being taken advantage of because friends know that you're always going to pay and it becomes an expectation rather than a gift? I honestly, I think I'm kind of lucky because I don't think I'm that way, but I have observed it in a close family member who very much is that way, and I think I learned not to be because I didn't want to be taken advantage of. So um, I'm pretty good about not using money to influence relationships, but I continue to watch that happen, and it's unnerving. It's unnerving to see. You know that saying, if you give a person an inch, they take a mile. And when
Yep.
there's money involved, I mean, who wouldn't? If if it creates an expectation, the first time you take your friends out and you're like, "Hey, I got this," and then the next time you do it again, and before long, that's what they think of you as. And whose fault is it? I mean, we create that ourselves. So
Yeah.
that's something that I've been very intentional about not doing. Um,
Mhm.
it, yeah, but I'm not saying. I think it's more my personality, and I think that some people who are very generous struggle with it more. So I'm probably lacking a generous spirit in some ways.
I doubt that. It is also it's generous to yourself to know your boundary and what's important to you and what feels authentic to you in that way. And also it's generous to like the rest of your immediate your nuclear family and the people who are going to come after you, right? That you're able to
Mhm.
kind of be authentic and set a good example of what a good relationship sort of looks like in that capacity. So
Yeah.
yeah, I think that it's a really interesting conversation that like sharing and talking about wealth and that relationship kind of the family system and how you were able to sort of start with something that was inherited or a gift and then kind of build up your own business from that. Like, what would you say are big lessons or learnings or things that you've had to educate yourself on around just being a steward of
Mm.
kind of being Gen 3 in your family and going forward? There's a lot of stigma around legacy, and is it like your grandparents' legacy or is it your own legacy that you're creating? Like what does that bring up for you? What do you think about
Mm.
there?
You know, the first thing that comes to mind isn't even about money, but it's about legacy in my family that goes beyond that. And it's a legacy that I'm carrying and feel so proud of, which is my grandpa, um, probably even further back than him, but he was a lawyer by trade, but had hobby horses. He had a lot of horses. He would get thoroughbreds and race them for fun. And he bought a ranch. And we, growing up, we always had horses, and they were circulated between our house and the ranch. And my dad was an incredible horse man, so he continued what his dad had started. Um, and then I and now I'm the only one in the family with horses, and I am so um, pleased to carry on this legacy of horses throughout the generation and be able to offer that to family when they come stay with us. Like, there's everyone in my family feels a little bit more settled when there's horses around because it's
Mm.
just part of our DNA. And I love that I get to be the one that carries that legacy for my family. When it comes to money, and you asked how did I educate myself on
Yeah.
that? Yeah, I think that, I mean, I think I first had to become very clear on what I was dealing with. That was the first step. Like, what do trusts mean? What are the implications around trust? What money am I allowed to access and what money am I not allowed to access? What's the money that's held in publicly traded assets with an advisor manages it. What exactly is the advisor doing? And is that something that I could do myself? Because I feel like, especially with, I think financial advisors serve a really important role, but I think there's also a tendency to get complacent with generations down the line because they're not the wealth creator, they're the kids. And so they're oftentimes just working for the first generation and not taking the time to really get to know the next ones. So I ended up, it was hard, but I found my own financial advisor that I pay hourly rather than an AUM fee. And I really started understanding what kind of investments, what I was invested in, because I didn't understand that at all before. But then once I realized, hey, this is my money to steward, I have to steward it well. And I'm not okay with paying someone for a service that I'm not receiving any benefit from. So, like, understanding that I had the capability to make changes was huge for me.
Mm.
Yeah, I think a lot of us in Gen 2, 3, 4, we don't realize that we're allowed to change things to fit with our own lives and our own goals. Uh, Do you see that with people you work with or yourself?
Oh yeah. That was like a big hell yeah from me. Well now, and that's like an amazing soundbite. Yeah, we don't realize that we have the ability to make change because and then it's
Mhm,
change in a couple capacities, right? There's change in the actual way that it operates. There's change to make it fit our lifestyle or like even how the generation has changed and like what feels authentic to us just like as a person. And I think part of being next gen or like a not a burden but like a weight that we carry is like what feels good to me and authentic to me and like in line with my values, like not conflicting with any of my personal values.
mhm,
Also kind of yeah, to be a good steward of everything that came before. I think people watch the movies and they're like, "Ah, rich kids inherit money and then they blow it all on boats and cars." And like that's just not the reality of what
no.
probably either of us see in our work. Like
Yeah.
most people in a rising generation are trying so hard to figure out what feels authentic to them, but also fits into a system that was not designed by them. And
Mhm,
so I think it's really wise when you say, like, you were able to figure out a piece that you could pull out and kind of change to make that work for you. I think we'll see that more with like value investing. That'll be a piece
mhm,
that is probably talked about a lot more in the next gen. In my context, doing family business type of work, we hear a lot like, well, the current owner or my parents, they've always done it this way. And like obviously that got them so far, but like why bother bringing in a next generation or a successor if you don't want to modernize or bring in
mhm,
technology or do something different from the way you had before? And so there's also that letting go from an old generation, but as a rising gen, that's a really sticky place to know like I have capacity to change this or I don't have capacity to change this. And I'm going
mhm.
to change the things that are within my control to change
Yeah,
this point.
yeah. That that quote of if it's just because it's always been done this way doesn't mean that it's the right way or that it needs to be continue to be done this way. But as children, as adult children in a family system, I think there's always this sense that I'm the child. My parents are the ones that know best. And as we enter into adulthood, get well into adulthood, I would say it wasn't until my mid 30s that I started actually making changes. The desire to had been percolating for years, but for many years I thought I must not be getting it right. Like this doesn't make sense to me, but it's probably because I don't understand it well enough.
Mm,
And that to me is so sad. In for one reason, because I could have saved myself tens of thousands of dollars by changing things earlier on and aligning my a new team of advisors that were in line with my purpose in life. But I just had this sense that I must not get it because they're the professionals. I'm the youngest kid. I'm little Susie. But then come to once I started really coming into my own and realizing, wait a second, they may be the professionals, but this is my money and this is my life, so I'm going to take control of it. And I make mistakes along the way, but overall, I'm so proud of who I've become in the process of uh, stepping into myself, taking ownership of what I have and making it useful for the life that I live and the legacy I want to create. And I do think that would make my dad proud to see that I've stepped into a position of ownership rather than a a little girl thinking that the people in the fancy offices need to make all their decisions.
Oh, that's awesome. Yeah, I got
Mhm.
goosebumps. And I can feel that too. I obviously never knew your dad. But most parents truly want their kids to just like feel good about their life. At least that's what I'm thinking
Mhm.
about for my kids. So I'm not gonna put anything on anyone else's parents, but I think about that for my daughter.
Mhm.
And you have a child as well. Like thinking about that next generation, maybe that's a good pivot into talking about the project that you're working on to kind of educate and help put words earlier around like what is wealth? What's my relationship to it? How do I talk about money? So why don't you tell us a little bit about your project that you're working on, the books?
Yeah, thank you. That's exciting. So I do have a son who's 6 right now, and we had a moment, you may have heard this story before, but a few months ago, I'd been very adamant about teaching him about money. Like he's 6, but he sells eggs because we have a bunch of chickens that he and my husband tend together. So he has a little egg business, and I got out a check ledger so that he could track his income and expenses. And I remember my dad trying to do that with me, and it was so dry and so boring. But I thought he needs to learn. I don't want him to not know how to handle money. So we've been doing this for a while, and I can tell he's not real into it. And finally one day he said, "Mom, if you say money to me one more time, you're going on timeout." And I realized that well, I know he's not the boss, but I also realized that I wasn't speaking to him in a way that he could understand, that met him where he was. So I thought, what better way than through story to bring up these concepts? They don't need to be driven in like a hammer and a nail. Like I love compound interest as well, but I can't teach my son about that when he's 6. You wait till the kid shows interest and then start talking about it. So with where he is in his life is he's entering into school and he's dealing with friends that have very different backgrounds in their family and their socioeconomic background, and he's starting to observe that um, kids really like to come to his house because he has all these animals and he has a lot of neat toys to play with. And he's noticed that going to other kids' houses, he said, "Why is their house so small?" So these are things that are entering his mind. So the books that I'm working on, this first one really is reflective of what my son is facing right now, and it's about two boys from opposite ends of the socioeconomic spectrum that are best friends. And the it's a simple theme, but the theme of that book is happiness is not about what you have, it's about loving what you have.
Mm,
And whether you come from a lot of money or come from not much money, that's a message that's really important. But especially when you're coming from money, it can be easy to tie happiness to the nice things that you get with your money. And I want parents to be able to have a place to start talking to their kids about money does buy these great things and we really enjoy them, but it's our family unit that makes us happier. It's these values that we live out of that really truly bring us joy. And then also going to the other the boy in this book that has less money, you see he has a very happy home life and there's not a lot of money. And so that's it's a conversation. I'm hoping that a book that allows a conversation to come up with parents and their kids, meeting their kids where they are at that stage in life.
Yeah, a really special project.
Yeah,
Awesome.
thank
Well,
you.
Susie, yeah, I know we're coming right up on time. How can people reach out to you, get in touch with you? Why don't you share that?
Thanks. So I have a website, familywealthdynamics.com, email Suzy at familywealthdynamics.com. If you're interested in the books, there's the one I just described, and then another one that I'm having edited right now. There's a wait list for them, and then I'm on LinkedIn at Suzy Riedman.
Awesome. Cool. Well, Susie, I'm so grateful that you came. I feel like we could talk for just 3 hours about our
Yeah.
experiences, that the opportunity to feel seen and understood, and also to recognize like where our stories are similar and where they're different, is just,
Mhm.
it's such a gift to be able to do that and to share this space with you. So thank you for coming on. And I encourage anyone, if you want to reach out to Susie, I'm going to put myself on the list, the wait list for those books. I'm really excited about that project. I think it's a really important conversation, and not, I don't know, like as a wealth inheritor in my 30s who has young kids and is thinking about how do I help my kids grow up to feel as empowered or more empowered about what they're going to inherit and receive. It's something that's definitely always top of mind for me right now. So thank you
Mhm.
for what you're doing. It's really important.
Yeah, yeah. We were just getting warmed up, so we'll have to do it again.
Yes, certainly. All right. Well, thank you. So glad you came.